Well, everybody, this year has been a full-blown journey from the nether realm into the twilight, and we're about to fade off into tomorrow, as if all age is in one day, but at different ages. We're simply in a day of a day. Things are starting to change now. You can see it's not full blown yet, but we got some red going on up there. Leaves are starting to fall. One leaf. The value of one leaf. But it's all about being yours. One thing from everything that is yours. As if it's the one thing that everything says that everyone gets. So get yours and get it. Quite a lot of bugs out right now. Some sort of white fly. Some gnats as well. Decided I would come up here today because I sort of switched my play up because of basically how hot it got up here and how extreme I was kind of taking it, you know. I was out for 3-4 hours at a time. And I just didn't want to burn out, you know. I wanted to be able to keep doing everything that I was doing, so I figured that it was smart to sort of change my playbook up a little bit, adjust some knobs. Wow, look at this. You guys remember seeing this? You can straight up walk across the water now. Crazy. I wonder if I'll just go out hiking in the winter too. Just straight up put my snowshoes on and just get up and get out. Gotta make sure that I know where those are at. Because when it snows, it just seems like you kind of wake up, you know? I want to be ready. We've still got a full season here though, this fall, this autumn. Here's this bush that I was gathering flowers from at the beginning of this year. Yeah, look, we got some change going on here. I've managed to really like create a ton though in this span of time. I've really gotten some things out too. It's not just that I've like sort of made things that have fallen by the wayside. It's like I feel like, you know, I've actually made some shooting stars, if you will, you know. Like I took some real shots in the dark. And to me, that almost feels like, you know, a real true shot, because it's like you're aiming for the bullet. It's like you're creating the ammunition itself. And the actual true function of a device such as that is to basically create something with motion, and to see basically a relationship kind of form. And in that sense, I feel like I've really pulled the trigger, like, I don't know, 10, 15 times, you know, this year. And it's almost like there's nothing more solid than you can hit than just the viscous nature of like outer space itself. Just straight up into the curtains and the motion of things. Like that's where the real math happens. It's the real seams. Sort of like what's actually considerate. You know, bright things, they're neat, and they certainly are what they are. Especially if they really do shine like a star. All right, we're gonna take off my jacket now. It was nice there for a minute. Time to change now. I'm gonna be missing all those people that I was starting to get to know on that other trail. I don't think anybody else that I managed to get to know there switched it up kind of like me with the altitude and the weather. But you know, for a time, I knew a lot of people on this one as well. Check out this plant. It's kind of neat the way that some of these leaves have, it's probably a seed pod. All dried up. Definitely a change in like terrain, you know what I mean? Like all the cactuses everywhere. It's not like a marsh. Basically, that place down there, it's crazy how just like in a couple miles, like I'm able to change the complete atmosphere. You know, went from a marsh and sort of some woodlands. You know, there's a little bit of a woody nature to that place, some creek, and then this just becomes like a wasteland almost up here. Back to the brightness of stars, though. I think consideration is, you know what I mean, a real inward focusing term where ultimately, you know what I mean, like maybe it allows us to shine, kind of thing. So then maybe, you know, all that shadow of outer space, it's kind of like hitting myself a little bit. Each star, like the sun, the closer you are to it, the more that it's always maybe about getting out, no matter what star it is in that sky. Well, anyways, we're back here. See where I get to, see how I feel, and I'll keep you guys updated. Look, it's like a desert jellyfish. Welcome back, my friends. We are here on the top of the mountain at the precipice, overlooking the valley, on the high road, as it were. This is now our 5th installment to the series on Aristotle and this graphic biography written by modern day Greece inhabitants. And we are getting fairly far now in the book. We're that far, so I mean, I don't know, what, 3/4 of the way done. And this time we got to a point where Aristotle was happily kind of working on that island with his family, and him and his wife started like classifying all these organisms into different categories, and he wanted her to like put together a diagram that basically showed the relationship of all things leading up to the pinnacle, which he believed was man, the pinnacle being, and sort of reminiscent of Plato's kind of theories. I think Plato's definitely much more spacey, though, kind of like, it's just like what really matters is thought, almost, and it's like whatever thought can actually drive away reality is almost more true than the world. And in a way it holds itself to basically an idea, in which case it can be the most pure thing that could ever be. And so Aristotle's classifying all these animals with his wife and stuff, and kind of going a much more realistic kind of route. Something probably much more suited for the teaching of Alexander and of practicalness and of practical nature is something I'm going to get into here because I have my own personal thoughts on that. Because I think that sort of the more you sort of widen your gaze a little bit, you see that there's almost no way that we're not ingrained in the system itself at the Did I catch that? That was nuts. It was straight up like a turkey vulture, dude. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it literally just came flying out of nowhere. Huge bird. And so yeah, there's kind of some differences, but it's much more of a practical kind of like philosophy and things like that. But he still sort of leans, I think, towards having some biases about not necessarily going full force into maybe nature, which is like, seeing everything for perhaps what it is, almost like there really is no sort of substance that basically connects everything. I think that's a big natural concept. I kind of lean a little bit in a middle situation about that, right? Because obviously I've already said, and you've heard me say that I think there's no way that we can be a part of a system and not necessarily inherently affect the system. I know that practical science will kind of say that as well, but I think it's, basically leads to a place where you're sort of represented in an internal way, which allows you to almost have something inseparable as to a matter of your form. And then everything sort of, there's another state where everything kind of coalesces, which is like inhabiting a living sphere as well. But that being the case, he goes away because he's ordered by King Philip to go and teach Alexander, like Pella or something. So he moves up there. Well, his family moves to like Pella or something like that, but he moves away from his family. Not everybody goes with him, and he starts teaching like Alexander and some other people that are coming up and things like that, teaching them all these things. And we see that, Aristotle and Alexander seem to have a good relationship, but just like Aristotle, like questioning those people back in the Lyceum or whatever about what is like a noble life, what is a noble pursuit almost. We see Alexander sort of taking that side of, I think, much more of a natural aesthetic to it, even more so maybe even than like Aristotle, even though he was one step down from Plato kind of thing. In that almost everything sort of basically can be reprogrammed almost, which sort of means that there's no essence almost beyond what a thing is, basically, is what I'm getting at. And I think that Alexander, it seems to me, like had much more of a viewpoint on that, and much more almost like trying to state that a noble pursuit is things of much higher need, basically, even than Aristotle was working with. And he's in this place. They set up a place for him to teach Alexander and all of his sort of, leaders that are growing up with him and all this stuff. And then King Philip is rebuilding a city for Aristotle because he asked of him to. And then we see Alexander kind of going off with Philip to some battles, and Hermias dies, one of Aristotle's great friends and allies, and so there's a little bit of a somber moment kind of thing. And yeah, so then Philip gets injured in his knee or whatever and starts walking with a limp. And that's where we sort of ended our play here. And there's one thing that I kind of wanted to mention, and it's just that I think that there really is no way that you can sort of experience anything beyond yourself, you know, and there's no way of almost knowing anything beyond yourself, or even if there is, really. And so you could almost, by that line of rhetoric, or by that line of reasoning, say that, you know, everything is sort of made up, or, you know, what is truth? And I had a little bit of a moment anyways, like in reading this, that I almost felt like I was just browsing through social media, you know, and the experience is kind of very interesting because it represents this competition. I think that media itself represents competition. I think media is itself an idea of competition. It's a gathering of things, and whether it's in books or in the arts or in some sort of digital format, right? I think that we endlessly are looking for opportunities to interject ourselves. If I was to sort of go back to my previous thoughts that I've had about what philosophy really is, you know, it's about that idea of sharing, but which is just basically making everything common, which is a natural sort of condition of the world anyways. And I feel like when you get to the place where it's like you're just doom scrolling, as they say it, or you're just like addictively reading or playing a game or like working on something like a starving artist kind of thing, I think that there's this moment that you're looking for something, and I think that ultimately what you're looking for is yourself, but you want to appear in a way that allows you almost to feel like it's what you've stated, you know, and this presents a challenge for whatever kind of media you're working with, right? It's like the ability, I think that when you're working with something three-dimensionally, the ability to find yourself is much more of a personal experience where you deal with perhaps accident and say that there's chance involved, and you know, it was your decision to sort of start, and so you find yourself in like a three-dimensional kind of form as you're working with three-dimensional things. And it's all about being able to say that that was a decision that you made that ultimately affected everything turning out good. So it's an inward kind of like focusing experience when you're working with like and you know, maybe it's the same thing when you're viewing like three-dimensional media, right? It's like you made a decision to maybe, you know, commit to a type of aesthetic. You've invested in something, possibly, perhaps, and it's like, okay, well, I've made a decision here, sort of thing. I think that that's reflective in maybe all media. But I think in reading, it's very interesting because you're looking for yourself, and it's the same thing with like doom scrolling and like digital media. I think you're looking for yourself ultimately in this like jumble up of words. But I think you're looking for all the words around your word to prove you. I don't think that you just want it to just be just you, and so you're looking for a precise like order of words that, you know, allows there to be some sense of focus. And I think that that's where this idea of thinking that there's something great to be found in knowledge actually comes from the great thing that you're looking for is always just you. I feel like if I was to collapse the entire sort of experience into one kind of final ultimatum of a statement there, and I think it's the same thing with like digital media as well. You're looking for you, but you want what's around you to prove you, and it's in a way that allows, when the word actually becomes present, kind of thing, it basically is showing what kind of word it is, which basically builds up a whole sort of aesthetic around something. And so I think that's ultimately what we're doing with a lot of things, and maybe with sort of construction of things, you're doing that with texture as well, trying to create the points that you think are valid in some sort of structure, and what leads you away and what leads you to sort of ideas, and how long you can do either of those things and type of thing. There's always a rational and reasonable way to look at it, and it's just, the funny thing with most people is that money is the most rational thing, and especially when you're dealing with like militaries and nations, money and resources are definitely like up there, sort of in the playbook. And if we are to look at like anybody who's a great figure that seems to be like they've played that game perfectly, right? Because it's this idea that it's the most real, and like I was saying, I can play it both ways, you know what I mean? Like I really can. Like I can sit there and talk about being a spirit in eternity and having something sold to you, right? And but on the same point in hand, I can say, you know what, there's like great chance involved with all of this. And before I go off on other theories that I've sort of had while I was reading this, that it's all about a look, it's all about a play, and history is basically just like a blindfold. And we're all just sort of actors on the stage kind of thing. And it's like, does anybody really succeed? And maybe they wouldn't necessarily feel like they did unless they had sort of an experience like this anyways, with the creation of themselves. But I always like looking at perfect things, you know what I mean? Things that represent ideas of perfection, right? It's like, is there anybody that knows every plot hole and loophole and risk associated with everything, so that it's just like they really did have a character that was just beyond ordinary, right? And so we could really accredit them with being a master of the universe, kind of thing. But realistically, the one who's never made a mistake does nothing, right? Basically. And it's like the guy who's never lost a war never fights. If I was to bring in two other sort of things that I've stated before, it's like the guy who's basically perfectly moral has never done anything in his life, and the guy who's never lost a fight has never really fought. And it's hard dealing with all of these sort of things with reality, and dealing with real world competition, where it's like, is it hard work? Is it chance? It's stuff that I've talked about with my family and friends growing up for as long as I can remember. My brother used to cite this book all the time that he would read called Outliers, from one of his sort of role models about, like people that just were outside the statistical average. You know, that's called an outlier in statistics and things like that, right? And so he would always tell me about these books and how about it's just like, you know what, it's all about how hard you work and nothing else really matters. And if you just work hard, you will get it. You know, it's like, it's all you got to do is like, if you just work hard, you will get it. There's nothing else that is really involved in the whole process. You know, there's no chance involved or anything to that extent. My brother is kind of like that. And it's in most part, I feel like, because, you know, a lot of good things have happened to him, and it's like a lot of it has worked out, you know, sort of thing. And does that mean that he's better than me? You know, if I'm being like a genuine family member, in most cases, I would probably say everybody's better than me. You know, and it doesn't necessarily hurt my ego or anything like that. It's just in something in the moment where it's like, you know, when you actually genuinely care to be around somebody, it's almost like you continually try to raise people up around you indefinitely and without question, right? But I just like to further sort of question the basis of reality itself, even, you know, and of this idea that it's like there's just so much chance involved with somebody trying to be so great. All the battles, you know, especially historically, where it's like everything's like hand to hand kind of thing, you know, and it's like all the battles, all the politics, all the speeches and whatever else, all the food even, right? It's like that's a big factor, especially if you're in like English history. But people getting poisoned and whatever else, you know, like I think that there is something to say there, where I do think maybe in much more of maybe a platonic way that you can sort of overcome that idea that competition is that brutal, that the world is that brutal. You know, and I think that there are a lot of ways that people even today say stuff like that, whether it's, you know, you're a children of the stars, or you're a child of God, you know, kind of similar characteristics there, but one's turning right and one's kind of turning left, you know, in terms of form and aesthetic and whatever else. There's a dragon for you. If you were coming over the mountains, you'd wonder where the volcano was or something like that, and you had no idea where you were. I live in a huge crater is all, basically. You know, sir, there are definitely ways in which everybody sort of comes up with these nuanced ideas to say that, you know, the thing that matters most isn't necessarily like the world, right? But then it's tough when you come up against, you know, those reality checks. You know, you get a bill or something like that, and it's like, oh, you know what? It's like I am sort of at the mercy of my own faults, kind of thing, or you know, I'm sort of limited in what I can do, and it's like when you see all this great stuff, there's so much great stuff that you actually just can't have. and you see how much better everybody else's life is than yours, you know? And so you kind of think like, oh man, well, this almost isn't even worth it, you know, like dealing with all this, this idea of me just being sort of worthless isn't even like, none of this is really worth my time even. Trying to be anything when it's just like, oh man, well, you know, even if I did go to war, would I win? You know, would you win? Or would you die, and would that be it? And, you know, then what happens after death? Does that actually motivate you to go to war? Can I convince myself that all war is just basically like another one of those choices and deciding where I stand on certain issues? Is that ultimately what creates borders and boundaries and everything in between, which solidifies structures and natures, and separates things of this world? Is war won with a tongue? And is that as much as we can ever do? But, you know, do we really have all those people cheering for us, or admonishing our feats, kind of thing? Like, is it possible to say that we are a great person, but greatness itself is like a star, and it operates off those same mechanics that I said, you know, a couple hours ago on the walk, on the way here? I mean, I'm certainly within my rights to say all those things. Does it make other people believe them? And what would it change, even if they did believe it? Would it change anything? Is change ultimately the master of our realities? So then maybe if we can somehow come to terms with change, then we can come to terms with all this competition. And I think ultimately, you know what, like, maybe success is that idea of creation and of yourself at some point in time, if you actually have pursued all of these things, you know what I mean? And it's just like that idea of making a decision with a sculpture or a painting, or figuring out or finding out some way to express what you've read, you know, getting things out, finding some way to portray yourself, you know, digitally, that makes you feel like you're something you can be proud of. You know, have I ever been in fights? Certainly felt like I was fighting to stay alive for, you know, plenty a number of times. But, you know, maybe if we're to be like those perfect things, then we would just say like, yeah, well, fighting, I'm so good at it, I've never fought. Morality, I'm so good at it that I've basically never existed. There's just so much. I don't affect anything. Really. You know, but at the end of the day, I think ultimately what you can only feel success for is the decisions that you feel have shaped your life. Is it how you look? Is it how you sound? Are you happy? Are you willing to defend what makes you happy? As if that were politics on some grand scale, the distribution of goods from one place to another. Always defending your actions. Am I merely seeking to compare myself? But at some point in time, I feel as though I could compare myself with myself. And you know, I feel like my words are real and considerate if something takes the time to listen. I feel like I'm better at a lot of things than I once was. I'm probably much more willing to defend and commit to things consciously. I feel like, you know what, I was probably good at a lot of this stuff before, but I think a lot of it was unconsciously. You know, it was almost just like I was much more doing it, but on a much more fine level, you know. Maybe I am no better or greater than I've ever been. If I talk about it enough, right? And I actually look back enough and think. And sort of allow myself to speak. Like I can still hear myself from another time. And then maybe you can accept everything and everybody for what they are, and you can actually figure out what you really enjoy. And in finding good company is perhaps maybe your best victory you could ever really achieve. But is there no glory in these things? In the idea that it's not for life or death. But I would even question how much you feel of the world you could change if you were in such a circumstance. And I guess that's why we're pondering the greatest people to supposedly ever live. Is because supposedly that's what they actually did, is completely change the world in a way in which everybody recognizes. You know, so, you know what, maybe really the only thing I could do if I was to actually just be real is just say what I like the most, you know, who is my hero? who's my champion? And maybe that's as far as anyone can ever really go. Being able to get, behind something, behind somebody. Say these things. I had once upon a time, I feel like I was contemplating favorites so much, and this idea of love and this idea of choices, and like, how love is blinding kind of thing. Check this out. There's another one. Maybe they're like sage chickens, actually. That one kind of looked like one. Just interesting. They just kind of glide. Not even really flying. They're just like gliding across the canyon. My whole ploy, you know what I mean? My ruse with favorites was I would always just say, I'm my favorite. It's like, can anybody really fault me for saying that, It's just like, what is death? I can sort of come up against and sort of put my sword's tip up to the throat of maybe the sky and just, say something like, what is death even? Like, if death is like real, then we don't understand anything. Why would I think I understand it to even be able to take it from something? That's a position that I've had before. It's just like, yeah, well, what is death but change? And it's like, are we to say that it doesn't change us just as much? Then who's to say that I'm, even alive? Considering that, like, maybe I'm the one who's died. It's sort of how I spin a lot of that, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm really trying to just thwart everybody's idea that what I've done hasn't been great or important, it just makes sort of everything seemingly futile. Maybe that's childish, to sort of do that. But, is it really that bad, considering all the other things that things do in this realistic world to basically take advantage of everything else? If I just say that, you can't understand anything. You don't understand. You just don't understand. Am I the bad guy? If that's like my weapon against like a competition, basically. Just like, you just don't understand it. Considering all the things that you see everything do in this world to basically experience something for themselves. Well, that guy over there, all he did is just what did he do that was bad? It's funny. It reminded me of this skit. I was like watching this like Happiness and Cyanide skit, and there's like a guy in hell, and he's like wondering why he's in hell and stuff like that. And like the judges like read out what his little thing is, and these people are like cartoon characters kind of guys, and it says, somebody said, hello. And he said, it's 12 o'clock. Just like somebody was asking him the time, and he just said the wrong thing back. Which is funny, because I think a lot of people connected with that joke, because people do experience that in real life, right? Just like this guy was in hell for like not being quite right. You know what I mean? Is that all I am? He's just not quite right. Or whatever, you know, like I'm on the same topic, but I don't fully realize, you know, the situation, or do I? And I've already made my decision as to how I respond, kind of thing, when the water's above you. And you have to tell yourself whether or not you're up or down. But, you know, the realistic thing to do is to name who your hero is. Because then it's just like, oh yeah, then, you know what I mean? These things can fight. Forever long or whatever, you know, like. And then you're making a commitment, which is real, which is, I think, is what people are looking for more than anything, you know. And you can just say who's the better hero, you know. But it's just like, as long as you've just stuck with one guy your whole life, then you're not a traitor. And as much as anything can be considered to, you know, or be expected to affect the world in any way, it's like you've just basically committed to, you know, something. And, you know, if I was to be true to myself, I've sat here and talked long enough. It's definitely Goku for me. As nerdy as that probably sounds to anybody who's studying Alexander the Great and all these other people in history. My favorite hero is a cartoon made in like the 90s. That's like something that was presented to me, you know, in a way that made it seem like it was like part of my world. But then the more that I've grown up, I've just realized that it basically came from just somewhere on the opposite side of the planet, you know what I mean? The other end of the universe kind of thing. Yeah. I'll put Goku up against your guys' whoever you guys got. As they say in the forum, it's a term still relevant today. Goku solos. Your verse still. So yeah, that's my real way of dealing with the world. It's just like, just say what you think, you know, and get as close as you can to maybe the battle, which is really the only battle there is for decisions, ideas. Which ones are you gonna stick by? Maybe that's all a hero really is just being able to stick, you know. But I must say that if I ever acknowledge anything I'm not like any other fan you probably ever heard of or whatever, you know what I mean? I basically just run with the conversation, the dialogue, and if that's the topic, then I'm gonna like make my position clear and like stand somewhere, you know, kind of thing. But it's like, don't get me wrong, I'm not like almost even a fan by like any means or measure, you know. It's just like, if I'm given a question, then I search for the answer. And if the answer is something on war and politics and these things that just seem like it's just pure chance that somebody could even ever succeed in any of these avenues, kind of thing, you know? Politics and war, pretty similar. You know, business even is something that kind of goes hand in hand with that as well, in just terms of what succeeds and becomes popular. You know, I've talked a lot about popularity, my thoughts on that. You know, it's just uncanny. And the thing about popularity is that maybe it's so based off of real things that you just know that something that's just there because it's popular, if you're in such a place where you hold popularity on such a high pedestal, which is something that I obviously don't, like, you know, maybe I can even just feel more confident about my position now the more I just talk about this, right? Because if you hold up popularity so much, like, it's just you're living in that idea of the world. You know, I can even look at this rock and it just looks fake to me almost, you know what I mean? Like, I can get that perspective just sitting here long enough and talking, but you're basing your reality on things that are so, like, fleeting. And the funny thing is that basing your reality more on these philosophical ideas is going to be things that stay with you and give you more motivation and confidence for such longer than popularity. That popularity is sort of sad to place on such a high pedestal, because it is things that wash away. These are things that wash away, and they die, and they become deceased and cease to persist. You know, but there's more to say about having a position on things and how that relates to settling down the idea of wars and of conquerors and of the world's greatest kind of thing, you know. And I think a lot of it is mostly just due to obviously the timing of the conversation has a lot to do with it. But I think there's something about just being able to take a position and make a decision and say something and stick with it and be like, yeah, you know what, for the most part, that's kind of how I've always felt, kind of thing. It sort of allows you to put that up against all these ideas of what if and why not me. Kind of want to sit here for just a little bit longer. This is nice. This is nice to me. I think maybe because there's so many choices that you could have, that it's just like in regards to all these things and people, like maybe you invoke a sense of yourself and you identify with a champion or hero in some way, with somebody who does sort of exemplify that idea of something that does know all those risks, you know, and it sort of puts you in a place where you can be attacked because you're making a decision about something, and so you sort of either have to stand with it, you know what I mean? Can somebody beat you up in this makeshift battle, and are you gonna lose your position like that, you know, like, and just talking with somebody and they say, well, what about this? What about this guy? 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 You'd be like, oh yeah, and then change your mind or whatever, you know. I think there's something to do with that, about it. But I think it's in defeat. It's like naming something upon defeat. I think that's the most real part of it, is that if you do just get defeated, like, you know, and that's ultimately what we're dealing with here is the idea that we can't. It's the idea that we can't do it. You know, and maybe that's why it's a real answer to say somebody else, right? And like, if you can't, then who do you think could? I think that's what's real about it. That's why naming somebody is important. Or just picking a position, even if it's not very serious about whatever, you know, because it can be used in a very serious way at those moments where you do feel like you're defeated, you know. And what would be a realistic sort of experience about that is I don't know, setting yourself up maybe a little bit, you know what I mean? So kind of what's the last thing you think about? You know, so it can be an automatic sort of jerk reaction. You guys have ever seen anything really, just a thing called like things sort of still animate themselves even after they're dead a lot, you know. But if I'm combining all of this with like all my other things, you know what I mean, like maybe that's where I'd run to and hide, you know what I mean? Like if my body had a last motion kind of thing, right? And you just got to set it up in your reflectory that you got going on, so that's what you hear. Kind of like your observatory. And again, I feel like I want to talk about this just a little bit longer. Like, I don't know why. I've hit that feeling like a bunch, you know. I've hit it a bunch. Like when I'm just like, yeah, that's exactly it. You know, like if life really is real, why does it matter to have a position? Maybe it allows you to be a human being, saying something like that at any time, you know, like you weren't a monster, and it's like you did actually acknowledge things. And before you sort of lose the moment or whatever, just by sort of name dropping as much as you could, which who knows is maybe a way at certain times, right, of crossing some waters or whatever. I think, yeah, maybe it is just, if things really are real, then it's you acknowledge a reality. Basically, you acknowledge a reality, and you acknowledge like the people that took part in that idea that you had. And maybe that is defeat, you know what I mean? Is the world, but then maybe doing that allows you to sort of recognize more things. The more that you do that with everything, and it's not necessarily just this one point and when it's the most serious, but then maybe it's like we can connect further with other things that I've said, like it's all serious, like everything's serious all the time. And so you can recognize all that stuff all the time, and it's just, that's what defeat is learning to recognize. And then maybe we can go back to my tongue twisting kind of things about philic and phobic, and Plato, and something that seems like it's moldable, but the word isn't. And then, Aristotle, it seems something like it's just like wavy, but it's certainly noticed more in specific instances, which seem to be much more down to earth and real and natural, and how it pushes us towards being something that has to make decisions, has to recognize, and maybe we can recognize ourselves. But that's ultimately the feeling of defeat, is just in sheer recognition of something. Is just you recognize a force, basically. And then maybe I could translate from the cartoony, and then maybe I could recognize, a force right now or something like that. You know what I mean? Like I can take the conversation one order of magnitude down or up, right? And it's like, or do I recognize time? And it's like, if I focus on recognizing other things, it's either pulling or pushing me in certain directions, maybe I can hit some mark in time with this, and it really was just a matter of time before I actually was able to say something real, that sort of works along with everything else that I've said. A lot of it has to do with who I'm around when I recognize certain things, you know what I mean? Or what I say about people and stuff. Time, still. Maybe right now, even more than ever, it's like I could say this, like I recognize the woman. And just like the ability of this form to somehow take all these things. It's like I feel like a woman is like a centrifuge or something, you know what I mean? It just like has so much in it, but it just spins everything so effectively that it creates, you know, a different picture depending on whoever the woman is or whatever. It's something that, as much as I respect it, I definitely feel like I'm in competition with it. You know, I'm not like a lot of other people in that sense, where it's like, you know, I feel like it's my opposite or something like that. I feel like, you know what, it's like a being that's like something. We're all just beings. If I was to go further off of Aristotle's ideas here of this chart, it's just like everything's the same thing, but we're all just you know, it's all the same kind of being basically, and we're all just like trying to say that we're necessary. And is what we do actually is that giving us advantage over the natural world, or is it actually just creating needs? You know what I mean? Just sort of flipping and reversing that whole thing like I've done. You know, and I battle a lot with biology at a lot of times. I'm sure you guys could see that in a lot of my other videos and stuff. You know what I mean? I battle with everything basically until I come to some realization of a point that's necessary, you know, for me to recognize before I feel that it's detrimental kind of thing, you know. I'm getting there with this, and it's just by order of time, you know, kind of thing. I'm about to hit an hour here, which is whatever, so. Yeah, and I fixed my drawing of, here, I'll show you guys. I fixed my drawing of Medusa. I made her better. I still think she's hot. I fixed her legs. There was like something, I was like, oh, I wonder if I can fix that. And I, again, just kind of took another chance and did it. And I think now she looks even better. Sort of something that won't be criticized as much over time, but yeah, like I respect the woman, and it's just like I want the woman, but I don't know if genuinely I'm the right person to hold that in that situation in consciousness, you know. It's like I think I'm just too unreal, you know. Like I can't say that I respect it as much as I can, like, but I can't say that this isn't about me, basically. Like I can't live my life and say that it isn't about me. And I know that just being with a woman and like having a family, I'm too selfish. Like, you know, I really am. I'm just way too selfish. As much as I can express admiration for things in words and acknowledge its form and function and its needs, and also its ability to change things, you know, or whatever, its abilities, I really don't think I'm a good person for a woman, or for a family, or for anybody like that. I would have to change completely. But it's like, do I really want to change? I actually really like who I am, you know? Like, I like who I am, but it's like, I see everybody with the family and all that stuff, and it's like, I don't think that's for me. You know, and maybe, again, just like with all this other stuff, like, maybe I'm just coping. It's a coping mechanism to deal with what I can't have, you know? But I could deal with it in all the same ways that I've tried to deal with expressing the realities of this book, you know, here, kind of thing. I'm sure I have. Saying that maybe I participate in the process unconsciously and naturally, you know what I mean? And it's just like in the wild, much more so, it's like things just communicate basically, and then they go on their way. And that's how it works. But again, that's just coping mechanisms. You know, if I'm just to be real, I can be real and just say, you know what, like, this is just how I deal with reality, and just not being able to do everything just by saying stuff like that. You know, but are there certain things that I'm good at? Yeah, like, I'm in fucking good shape. You know what I mean? I think I have a pretty good looking face, and my hair looks good. And it's like I feel like I'm pretty good with my style and my words. I've traveled the world. I've put a lot of shit on paper, whether it's just been in my own time or in academia's time. A lot of shit. I've done a lot of shit right, according to myself and to other people. Done a lot of shit that a lot of people don't agree with. Maybe a lot of this stuff, but that's who I am. My name's Austin. But anyways, guys, I'll see you later. Bye.